Jim Joyce, happy Wednesday, man.
Happy Wednesday, man. This is a big episode today, isn't it?
It sure is. Big 5-0. You gotta you gotta do that 5 times, man. Come on.
It's like we're teaching we have a new, pandemic puppy in the house, and we're teaching him how to like take his paw and give us high five. That's what reminded me of.
So my younger one, you got to do the little, and then the dog flips. My younger one was training our dog when it was a pup. So we'll have
really?
to show that. Yeah.
In the dog flips. The dog flips.
Yeah, flips. I mean, whenever, but big week. I also I think you mentioned next week you're going to US. So I think next week we'll be doing this. You'll be where's home? Where are you going?
That's the game plan. I'm going to go to Boston. See some of the Health Beacon team there, see awesome. The family. And I guess so I got to get my PCR test, and hopefully on my way to Boston or there'll be a few extra vaccinations, available for
I mean, it's honestly amazing. We were talking about this too, come home, because I mean, Europe is definitely lagging behind on all of this.
Yeah.
But it's everybody I'm talking to, it's like, oh yeah, I got it, or I'm getting it. And so,
everyone.
The new administration is really rolling this out. So, and the numbers are coming down. I think I don't really watch it anymore, but honestly, this is a C-19 free zone.
Right.
In other news, and as always, I just literally earlier today, I watched Russell Glass from Ginger on just DaMassa's WTF, right? So
okay.
200 million plus at a 1 billion valuation. I'd actually, so I recommend people watch it because it, to me, the question was always like supply and demand, right? I mean, mental health is important, but like right. How many professionals are there, right? Because we've seen everything from Talkspace to everything else. Big week. I saw also, just on Monday alone was like Row 500 million, PatientPing got sold for 500 million. Evidation Health, congrats to Deborah and Christine for raising 153.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm surprised there was like not 7 SPACs launched by Tuesday.
Right. Like, I'm fascinated just also by just the sheer amount of like, we'll say kind of, it's still, is it risk capital, like risk capital going into the space? It's still relatively like, cause most of these businesses are massive, in terms of revenue, sales, size. I mean, there's a few, but, so just the sheer numbers being applied against still relatively small businesses, right? It's like,
yeah. And that's why I mean, we'll see. I think a lot of this, I mean, there's obviously lots of, and you know what, let maybe save that discussion for a guest, because I'm always very curious on, and I think this was at a Health Excel dinner maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we're like, hey, do you remember this? Yeah, he or she raised so and so, and my question is, the raises are great. What is the actual output and outcomes and impact, and how do we start measuring this and really value, right? So. But with that, and because we're all in this space for health consumers and patients, maybe you do a quick one, and then I will start letting Lilly Stairs in. But
yeah, no, I'm excited. Yeah, so we have Lilly Stairs joining us, and she's going to do a much more eloquent job of introducing herself than I could. But she is an inspirational person. Yet she has a very good kind of profile. There she is. Hey, Lilly.
Well, how are you?
So good. How are you? Good that we're seeing you now. How are things?
Good. This is so fun. I like how you guys jump right in, and I don't know if your viewers know that like there's no prep for this. We kind of just jump right in, and I love that.
we just shoot it, and good to meet you, Lilly. And before you like actually popped in, Jim was saying how you're such an inspirational person. So I'm like, I've been really looking forward to this discussion today.
Yeah, so I've wanted you on for a while on it, because I was thinking of like your total, like when we think about Shot of Digital Health, other than my co-host here, Eugene, who kind of is yeah,
actually taking the shots. I'm back to Japanese whiskey today, so it is 7 p.m.
Yeah, this is a.
I will say I'm jealous because, you did say it is a shot of digital health, and typically I would be all in on having a drink. Even at 2, I would do it for you guys, 2 Eastern, but I am speaking at an FDA ad board today, and I really have to keep it together right after this. So I'm
absolutely understood. All good.
Let's not blow it. But, yeah. So no, I'm really excited to this because I know you through our mutual friend and Health Beacon U.S. leader Laura Hamilton, and every time I've interacted with you, or even like online, or when I've seen you at the office, you're always like, you're giving us, it's the shot of digital health from Lilly style, and Laura always speaks so highly. But I got a chance to listen to some of your like podcasts and some of the work you're doing. So maybe if you could introduce yourself for our millions of listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. We're worldwide, right? I mean, you guys are very international. So I am Lilly Stairs, and I got involved in the healthcare space about a decade ago when I was diagnosed with multiple autoimmune diseases. So I consider myself a 3-time autoimmune patient living with psoriasis, Crohn's disease, and psoriatic arthritis. It was a really tumultuous road to diagnosis, and then went through a lot of treatments to get where I am today. But I'm thrilled to say that I've been in medically controlled remission for about 7 years now, and that's thanks to our amazing, healthcare ecosystem that has developed medications and resources for me to access. So that's how that's how I got involved in this space. So I've been working with pharma, biotech, health tech, and patient advocacy nonprofits for the past 10 years. I work to build programs that empower and educate patients. And currently I do that at my consulting firm, which I launched last January, right before the pandemic, Patient Authentic. And so I work across the healthcare ecosystem to support patients. And I'm also currently serving in the role as interim CEO at the American Autoimmune Related Diseases Association, where I've been a board member for the past 4.5 years.
Awesome.
I mean, amazing journey. And I'm actually just curious how much of that you did, quote unquote, I'll say self-hacking as a patient, right? Because I think there's just, there's so many cases we hear, right? That, the healthcare system was not as helpful, and unless you take charge of it, and it's a little bit about the patient communities, right? So some of the patients helping each other.
Totally. So, I'm going to use this opportunity because it's March, it's Autoimmune Awareness Month. And I want to, I'll talk a little bit about what we experience as autoimmune patients. So I was diagnosed at 7 with psoriasis, and my psoriasis, it looked like little chicken pox all over my body, which was, and it's itchy. I was going in for light treatments. You literally stand in the light box at the dermatologist. My mom would drive me in every morning before elementary school. It was, a lot of people think that skin conditions aren't a big, quote unquote, aren't a big deal, but they do really deeply impact you, mental health, physical health. And what's interesting is that 30% of people who are diagnosed with psoriasis actually end up developing psoriatic arthritis. But nobody ever told us that. And so I lived, I went for up until I was 19, suddenly I had this knee pain, and we thought it was maybe a workout injury. And then suddenly the pain started to escalate in my whole body. So I was waking up every morning, I was feeling achy. And then there was one morning I woke up and I literally couldn't move. And my mom was dressing me and feeding me. And, we were trying to go through all these appointments. Is it parvovirus? Is it Lyme? Like what's going on? And I did finally get the psoriatic arthritis diagnosis. So that took time. And I think that had we known that psoriasis was an autoimmune condition and arthritis, there was a chance I could get that, I would have gotten to diagnosis quicker. The final diagnosis, Crohn's, at least knock on wood, final for now. A lot of people with, multiple autoimmune diseases do get more. And so and this is part of, what I'd like to call attention to as well, is that it's very difficult for women who are diagnosed with autoimmune diseases. So about 75% of the people with an autoimmune condition are women. And I ended up developing this stomach pain that came out of nowhere. So awful, debilitating, harrowing pain. I couldn't even drink water without feeling pain. And I was in and out of the ER 3 times in one weekend. I was in and out of the ER 3 times in one weekend because they kept sending me home and saying, you know, are you happy at home? Are you happy at school? Are you happy? Like, it's all in my head, right? That this can't be, like, you know, we're not seeing anything. This makes no sense. Finally, they admitted me. And, you know, talk about digital health and med device and all of these things. What ended up being like the saving grace was this pill cam that I took, and it took pictures as it moved through my body every 3 seconds. It's like a little pill. It's like a little pill with a video in it. And they found bleeding ulcers in my small intestine. And that's when I received the Crohn's disease diagnosis. And so, you know, but what happens is that we are consistently seeing disbelief and dismissal of women, you know, even worse for women of color in our healthcare system. And it is causing massive delays in diagnosis and then delays in getting to the right treatment. And what happens is when you delay diagnosis, these conditions, these autoimmune conditions, as they keep going untreated and uncontrolled, they spiral out of control, and you can end up with irreversible damage that, you know, can't be fixed and needs surgery, or you know, ultimately you just live in chronic pain the rest of your life.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. So I'm glad you're in remission. I mean, that's fantastic, and that's biologics and treatments and self-care and all those things. And
I'm drinking to that too.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And hey, a healthy glass of wine too. So that's my self-care. Yeah, no, it certainly is. I am on a biologic, which has just been, I mean, biologics have been revolutionary for the treatment of autoimmune conditions and a lot of other diseases as well. So I really function completely normally. I mean, I'm running my own company. I'm active every day. I'm able to spend time with family and friends. Like, it's truly a gift.
Yeah.
So we had Melinda Decker as a guest on The Shot, and then I just had her on my DTX podcast with Mette, right? So I'm sure you're familiar with Mymee, right? And
Mette and I were on the phone this morning.
There you go. It is a small world. I figured there's definitely a connection. And so to me, I'm very much looking at Mymee as sort of managing your existing conditions, right? And with hopes of some remission, reversing to remission. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on it first, on that, and maybe Mymee specifically. I don't know if, you know, if you can talk about it, but I would also secondarily love to understand, how do we actually prevent and diagnose this quicker or earlier, right? So two sides to the coin.
All right, 2 parts. All right, let's start with Mymee. So Mymee is one of my favorite digital health solutions out there. And I see a lot, you know, that I come across, whether it be through my work or people reaching out to me. We'll talk about Health Beacon too, Jim, because I really like Health Beacon. But I'll start with Mymee because I actually did the program, the Mymee program. And what I love about Mymee is that it is marrying health or tech with a human touch. And I think that digital health and health tech, it's brilliant. It's moving the needle. I think it's essential, but we cannot lose the human touch that is such a critical piece of who we are, but also, you know, within healthcare, you're making really critical decisions that are sometimes life and death, that are impacting quality of life. Having a person to hold you accountable makes it, and to talk to you, makes a huge difference. So I actually got to work with Mette directly. She was my health coach, and so I was kind of an early adopter, if you will. And I learned a lot about my health through that about my autoimmune diseases and what triggers through that program. What I like about Mymee too is that they want to be a complement. So I want us to be bringing Western medicine and complementary medicine together, because it's so important that we're doing both, that we're taking care of our bodies, but we also take medicine when we need it. And so I found that a lot of solutions, sometimes on the complementary medicine side, they try to say, don't take your medicine, don't do exercise. We don't want that. We want somebody who's going to say, we want you to do both. And Mymee does a great job with that. And so, I did the program. It was really easy. I loved the app, and I worked with Mette, and I learned what was, what foods are like not so great for me. I have to be honest, wine we found wasn't amazing for me, but I was like, Mette, I'm sorry, I'm not giving it up. I was like, this is why I have my biologic.
Did you find
leave quietly, like Clubhouse?
Yeah, exactly. Did you find any alcohol that you're okay with? I'm honestly curious, or not really.
No,
right?
I mean, it definitely was more. So the other thing is that my biologic has me like in full remission. So I had to pay attention to really little things that, I was like, my body just felt like a little like when anybody eats mac and cheese, nobody really feels good after they eat mac and cheese, right? If you're listening to your body. And so it was kind of the classic. It was more like gluten and dairy, and soy is a big issue for me. I actually avoid soy, but I try to follow an 80-20 rule where I'm 80% of the time I'm avoiding my triggers, and 20% of the time I'm letting myself eat what I want, go out. And that's so important for quality of life and mental health.
And how are you thinking about, like, I remember I was reading some strange kind of book I picked up. I brought it up in the podcast. Remember, it was called The Island, and it was about this like little island that was in Asia that had the perfect mix of like Eastern and Western medicine on this little like captured island. And I talked about, and I remember being fascinated by it. But so are you like, as like president of, and you call it ARDA, is it ARDA? Is that the right?
ARDA, yeah. Did I go back and, yeah, that's so the American Autoimmune Related Diseases Association. We call it ARDA because it's a long name. That's our acronym.
But are you introducing, like you talk about complementary medicine, like, are you introducing kind of Eastern, philosophy, into that alongside the Western, or where do you come down on that?
Well, I, as interim CEO, I don't know that I can speak for the organization as a whole, but I can speak as me and as what I believe. And I do feel that we need to be integrating both, but it needs to be done safely. And unfortunately, what I've seen a lot is that Western medicine says, just do Western medicine, and Eastern medicine says just do Eastern medicine. And I don't believe that's how it should be. But we are certainly at ARDA, we are working to, like we have in our prospectus this year, that we want to fund a webinar around nutrition and autoimmune disease. Because we want to be having these conversations and helping patients to do it within a safe way, because a lot of what, people are getting advertisements on Instagram, like try this tea and only drink this tea. And this is like diet culture too, right? It's not even just autoimmune, but they'll say this will heal your autoimmune disease. And it's like, well, no, we can't, you don't cure or heal. It's, you go into remission. And so I think that we have to be careful of some of that snake oil type stuff out there. So we're trying to combat that. And we have a summit coming up in the fall where we're going to be integrating, conversations around clinical trials and traditional medicine. And we're also going to be bringing in chefs to do cooking sessions and meditation and wellness people. So absolutely, it's something that we are encouraging both.
And have you come across Eugene's company, Eugene and Marina's health coach?
Health coach. And it was actually interesting because, you mentioned earlier, just to touch on that, being accountable to a human being is important. And like, Marina always says, like human eye and that empathy is still better than AI today, right? Because until those machines, so it's like human eye, not versus, but together with AI is actually the perfect combo, right? And again, AI being a buzzword, but just tech. And I think it's interesting. Also, you brought up, as we were talking about like Western and Eastern, and you said, well, we're even going to have a webinar on food, right? And like to us, especially like as I've been diving into the kind of health coaching and the practice of it and reaching and setting your goals and the wellness vision, like to me, food as medicine, like what you put into your body, right, is super important. And I loved your comment earlier, like, who feels good after mac and cheese, right? And you actually don't know how bad you feel until you actually feel good, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what happened with my, that also is what happened just with my autoimmune diseases generally. And they always say you don't realize what you have until it's gone. And so my health conditions, like not having your health, when that's taken away from you, it's one of the most terrifying things. And so you learn to be grateful, but yes, if you actually start paying attention, absolutely, like you do really start to understand the way that your body works. And the food is medicine. Yes. I mean, I think that that's something that we need to keep having conversations around, again, in tandem with some of the conventional Western medicine. But, Mette would always say, Mette, who founded Mymee, she always said, we talk about, like, we put these little tiny pills into our body, but like, think about how much food you intake on a day versus that like little tiny pill. Think about how much food you're putting into your body, and just thinking about some of the processed crap that we eat. I mean, you don't have, Eugene, I'm not sure where you're based, but Jim, you're in Ireland, right?
Yeah.
We're in Barcelona.
Oh, nice. I mean, I do think I don't know all the ins and outs of food, but I do think you guys have a bit more regulation, and you don't have quite as much of the processed type stuff we have here in the States.
The US.
The short answer is correct.
Correct. You guys are doing, and I had a nutritionist I was seeing once who told me that, she had a patient who had issues with gluten in the US, but when she went to visit Europe, she went to Italy, and she's eating pasta, no problem.
Right. Yeah, my wife is Italian and she's from Venice, and we go to, I've always found like everyone celebrates the Italian diet, but what I found fascinating about it always was just the level of care they put into meal preparation. Like I remember meeting my in-laws for the first time, and they arrived, and we were living in New York, I think, at the time, and they just sat there, and all they did was, all the husbands were sent out to scout for food sources, so they went running through Manhattan, looking for quality of food, inspecting it, how freshness, what was going to be available. And they were just planning out their meals like in Manhattan, and that's all they were doing. And then they opened their suitcase, and, completely against all airline, transport food policies, it was loaded with food. They had like all kinds of food inside their suitcases, and they just started preparing pasta immediately, and they ate like, gods, they just ate phenomenally.
Yeah.
but all of them trim, fit, good looking, you know what I mean? Like, and you're like,
you have to, it's something to think about. So we have to, like, health is
like
holistic.
us, Jim.
Yeah. I love it. Health is holistic. We've got to be looking at all of these different factors and how that contributes. And we think about even food from, we look at obesity and type 2 diabetes being a massive issue in the US in particular. And, a lot of that does tie back to food, but that's also then again ties back to equity and access, and, people who are living in food deserts and don't have that access. That's a health issue. That's a public health issue. And that's something that we need to be working on and addressing. Yeah. And I hope tech that these brilliant minds can come in and work on, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I always wanted to ask you this question, Lilly, which was, okay, so first, as I said to Eugene, like, you're one of my idols because of this idea. I love this idea of taking a potential vulnerability, and making it your strength, right? And especially, it sounds like you had to do that at a relatively young age, right? You're coming in there, and it's like so defining. But now it's like, so something that would have been completely debilitating becomes the source for your business and the source for your energy, enthusiasm, relationships, and all these things. So like, what was that like? Did you consciously decide to do that? Was it a slow step into that where you become this empowered patient that's helping others?
That's a great question. I've always had a heart for the underdog and been driven by doing for others. That's been a part of who I am. So when I started, or back in high school, I started an anti-bullying program because my brother is a gay man who was really relentlessly bullied growing up. And that always broke my heart. And I said, I need to do something about this. So I started an anti-bullying initiative that, we ended up touring around the area, bringing this assembly that we put together. And so that's always been a part of who I am, to help others. And I'm also an all or nothing type of person. And when I received the final diagnosis, Crohn's. I was literally in the hospital bed, and I can truly point to a moment. I pulled out my computer and I started Googling all of, Crohn's, psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, and what comes up but autoimmune. And I never heard the term before in my life. And I was so angry that I had never heard the term, because I'm looking at the numbers, and there are over 50 million Americans living with an autoimmune disease. And that's about, for perspective, that's about twice as many as cancer. And we all understand and empathize when somebody says they have a cancer diagnosis or a loved one has cancer. And so I was upset that I didn't know. And so I didn't know what an advocate was at that time, but I knew that's what I was going to be and what I was going to do. And my mom was yelling at me to like put away my computer, because I was trying to work. I'm hopped up on all this morphine, and I'm like and I'm coming up with all these ideas. I was in college. I was like, I'm going to start a group on campus, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. It was immediate for me. And I am grateful for that, because it's helped me to cope in so many ways. And I really have been able to turn something that in the eyes of many could be considered a weakness or a struggle. And I've been able to turn it into a power and a strength.
Right. And do you ever some moments, do you say that's tricky? Sorry.
No.
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's a fine line, because my personal and professional are so blurred. There is no, it's just me. And in many ways, that's a beautiful thing, because, my business name is Patient Authentic. I like to think of myself as like this. I bring my authentic self to work, but that also means that I bring a lot of emotion and passion, and that can be draining at times. So I think it sometimes it can be a double-edged sword, but I wouldn't trade it.
It's interesting. Like, I've always thought, of course we have, our family, friends, the professional, but to me, it's like, I love that because if you're not authentic, A, people can tell, and B, I don't know personally, I don't know how to sort of separate it. Right. I mean, and I'm not talking about taking time off. I'm not talking about, it's like, people ask me like, how do you use Twitter? Like, do you put only professional stuff? And I'm like, no, I put whatever I think about, right? And it might be, digital health related. It might be something completely different. But I'm actually like, I'm going to build on Jim's sort of question, right? So you're laying there, right? Like Googling stuff. Like, did you know at the time? I love that term of like hashtag chronic boss, right?
Yeah.
Is this something like that you sort of came up with recently, or like maybe not the terms, but like you're like, you know what, I'm gonna freaking do this. I'm gonna be the chronic boss, right? Like,
well, that in particular is interesting. So I'll give you a fun fact that I don't tell everyone, but our
millions of listeners and viewers will hear it now. So
internationally. I was originally Autoimmune Barbie when I was first diagnosed, and I had a whole blog, and because I just saw that was what other patients were doing. They sort of identify themselves as different names, and I was like, that's what I'm going to be. And so that's kind of how I started. But the chronic boss in particular came about a couple of years ago, as I was. So within the patient advocate realm, you will see a lot of patient advocates identify themselves as something. So you have a friend of mine who is, or a couple of my friends. So I have Brooke Abbott, who's a phenomenal IBD advocate. She goes under the Crazy Creole Mommy. There's Amber Tresca, who's under About IBD. You have, just all these different advocates who had, they kind of had an umbrella for how they identified.
Right.
And so but I wanted to be defined by that strength and that power that I had created. And I wanted to create a movement around this idea that, no, your chronic illness doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger. And right. and this whole idea that I've turned my diagnosis into a career, essentially. And so that was where the chronic boss theme came up, kind of like hashtag lady boss. It was hashtag chronic boss. And right. I haven't rolled this out yet. And I've just in this past year have started to work more on this, but I am hoping to start to feature different women living with chronic illness and feature them as the chronic bosses they are, because a lot of us are creating careers out of this, and I'm thrilled about it.
Yeah, love it. We use, like, I've been using it for years. I've been using it for 2 companies. So my first company that I set up was a patient services company, and we said that the patients that we wanted to treat, and you probably have heard this before. It's not, I don't think I came up with it, but it was like that you are the chronically well, and so that these people that other than the fact that they have severe multiple sclerosis, or other than the fact that they have severe rheumatoid arthritis, they still have their lives, and we want to keep them chronically well, and not being defined. And that was, that, and then, in Health Beacon, from Point of Care, my last company in Health Beacon, which is a carry forward, we're just supporting that same group of people, in that same way, and then not letting them have to be defined by their, or choosing how they're defined by their condition, I guess,
I never heard you say the chronically well. I mean, it's interesting because Marina, I mean, you know the story, but Marina always hated, and I mean, people are different when people call her a patient when she was going through cancer. She's like, that's just a slice of my life. It's not my whole life. And I'm still me, Marina, and it's a diagnosis that we'll fight through, right? But I'm not, so I love that, chronically well.
Me too. I like it. You better go trademark that.
You can have it. It's all for sharing.
Chronically well.health. I registered. Boom, done.
And so I'm not sure. I mean, you probably have loads of questions, but like, what do you think?
I do. I'm trying to pace myself.
Go ahead. You go.
No, you go. No. All right, fine. I'll go. So I actually want to pick on a term, empowering patients.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually curious, what does that actually mean to you, right? I feel that the term, and my 2 cents, been kind of thrown around quite a bit, especially by sort of a lot of large companies, and a lot of check boxes and done, we empower patient, but peeling the onion, there's a lot of times nothing, right? So I'm really curious on your 2 cents on that, or more than 2 cents actually.
Yeah, well, it's just like the term patient-centric. It is empowering patients is a buzz phrase, buzzword, whatever you want to call it. Same thing as patient-centric. Everybody wants to be patient-centric. And now, I mean, honestly, to a certain extent, DE&I it's important, but I think that some people are using it more as a buzzword and not doing the real work behind it, which is unfortunately what also has happened in some cases with patient centricity. In other cases, it's not. In other cases, people are taking the time to put in the work to do the real work. And I was listening to your episode with Andre Blackman this morning, where you talked a little bit about that, doing the work. So I think empowering patients, I do like the term empowering, and I think it's important because to me, it means that we are giving patients the strength and the knowledge to speak up, to make informed decisions. So to speak up with their physician about what it is that they want in their care, to speak up on Capitol Hill about fighting policies that don't put patients first. It's helping to give them a voice, and it's giving them the tools. So that's sort of how I look at empowering patients. But I do think we need to come up with some new ways to say it.
I mean, at the end of the day, again, back to authenticity, which brands, companies are really doing it versus just using it as a buzzword. So at the end of the day, I think, to your point, I like your, speak up and actually get stuff done. And the terms that you use to get there almost become irrelevant, right? So
you're right, because people can see through it. People can see through when it's not genuine, when it's not authentic.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's a little bit painful, right? Like when people when they, it's like they kind of grab on to these things, when you're sitting in the boardroom, and it's like, oh, this dance and ceremony around it, but at least it's there. I have probably mixed feelings about it, because I sit in so many boardrooms where they talk about patient centricity, and you can see that, fundamentally they struggle to get themselves in the context of someone else, right? Like, or even respect that they're not in that context, that they can't understand, what they're going through. And it's,
I agree. And what I've found is that in boardrooms, in high level, when you're kind of speaking to people at the top, I understand there are business needs. There are
Right.
key business outcomes that we are striving for, but it's about how do we connect the dots to doing what's right, to also driving those key business outcomes, and showing that by doing what's right, we will be more successful. And so a lot of the times it is connecting those dots. And I don't think that, I think it's taken some time, and I think it's still in the works of people understanding how to do that. Because a lot of those of us who are good at connecting and being empathetic and being genuine and building those relationships, we may not be so good at talking about the key business outcomes and connecting that back to the numbers side. And so I try to talk to people about that and have them frame their thinking, because when I work with folks who are in these types of roles, like patient advocacy engagement roles, they'll just be like, well, I don't understand why this is just the right thing to do. And I said, yeah, it's the right thing to do, but this is also a business, and we're not going to stay alive if we can't show we can't show metrics. We can't show why we're doing this. So I'm trying to teach people how to connect the dots. And I think we need to keep pushing people to do that.
I was thinking the other day, how it's such a nicer time. Like we're looking at, we're in our next, kind of raise as a company, and, there's all these metrics that we're held accountable as a company now. So it's like, what are you doing on diversity, and what are you doing on sustainability, and what are you doing on, inclusion and health equity, and it's actually kind of pleasant, in some ways, other than when it's yielded as a weapon against you, it's obviously not very pleasant. I mean, you're not this and you're not that, and you're, but if it's wielded in, if it's kind of it's actually a pleasant way, because if you were running a company, whatever, a coal mine, 70 years ago, and you're watching people gacking as they come out of the, you might have felt pretty bad, but you're like, hey, we got to get the coal, I don't have a choice here, So it's kind of a nice time to run a company in some ways,
No, it is. It's good that these themes are being pushed, and that's what we're aiming for. Absolutely.
But again, I just want to comment, Jim, right? Nobody's actually pushing you, right? This is you and the team authentically driving this. So, and I think that's the difference also, right? Because a lot of times it's being pushed because it's a buzzword or something like that. And again, back to authenticity, and being authentic about actually doing these things and getting it done as you're scaling, as you're growing, as you're, wherever stage you're at, right? So,
but who's inspiring is it's kind of the younger people. They just walk in with people that, they can be kind of frustrating because they don't have, they don't work maybe.
Thanks, Jim.
We worked. but they're kind of inspiring because they come in with all these they're just a lot more sophisticated than I would have been at age 25,
That's good. We're doing right by the millennial generation, it sounds like. Then you're working with some good ones.
So I have maybe one more. I mean, I have 100 more, but we are sort of trying to keep this under 2 hours an episode. So
I'll come back for your next season.
So you also work with startups, right? And I'd love I mean, obviously, we had the whole discussion in Mymee, but where's the whole listening versus hearing, and maybe some of your experiences in the startups, from really just as a patient advocate, as a hashtag chronic boss.
Yeah, it's a great question. It spans the gamut. So in some ways, I think that the people coming out of Silicon Valley, which is where a lot of the health tech is happening right now. I mean, it's still, we're seeing other hubs that are coming through, but I do think that folks who are coming from outside of healthcare, there is this mindset of user centricity. I do think that in Silicon Valley, we are trained to user test and user test and user test, whereas I don't think that's something that we see in healthcare. It's been a key part of the reason we've had to push so hard for patient centricity, is because nobody was ever asking the patient. But on the consumer facing side, I think that tech has been a bit better about that. And so I think that there's some hope there, but your point to hearing versus listening, it's the same concept as in pharma and biotech. You can't just do it to check a box. And you have to really value those insights, and you have to, so I think about how, companies will just try to, sometimes I think that they take advantage of patients and caregivers, and it's important that we're compensating them for their time and we're really sitting them down to get their feedback and incorporate it, and having somebody present within the company. That's another big piece, is like, do you have a person who is patient advocacy or patient centricity or patient engagement focused, who can help be your guide and be the compass to help you stay on track and be a part of those business decisions. At Clara Health, one of the companies that I work with, and I was one of their founding members as a head of patient advocacy, brought on really early, like before they had even, they just had a couple $100,000 in the bank. I was with them in Boston. We went out to San Francisco. That's when I lived in San Francisco for a few years with them after we got funded. And I've since come back to work with them, and as part of my consultancy, I'm an advisor to them. And, having patient advocacy at the table from the beginning in a leadership position was instrumental in guiding the business decisions that we made. And I believe that has been a huge advantage. And the company will tell you, the CEO and the COO will tell you, like, that it has been an advantage to them, a business advantage, to have had patient advocacy from the beginning. And so I do think that it's kind of putting your money where your mouth is, right? And investing in having that type of person. So anyone who's got that type of role within their company, I usually think that they're pretty legit.
Yeah.
And I guess it's all about, again, obsessing on how you can solve that individual or the group of individuals' problem, right? Like, and if you're obsessed about it, then, even if they're not direct payment, direct pay for it, unlike Mymee in some cases, right? I think if you're focusing on that, the rest will come.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I think the obsession side of it, the idea, this whole concept, like we had on, the fellows from, we had Lee Shapiro and, and then from Livongo and, Rob Garber. Garber, one of the investors. And they talked about, like the whole underlying story that the founder, Glenn Tolman, was treating his son, was taking his son's glucose strip, 1 million times or something as a diabetic, and was really trying to bring the product to the world that he would have wanted, and wasn't there. And that's kind of this reservoir of like energy, when you're kind of building these companies,
Absolutely. And that's that personal connection, is that they have the personal connection, and that helps drive forward. And I think knowing your limitations, so being obsessed with it and knowing where you can answer the questions, but where you can't answer the questions, and where you need to go in and ask and iterate and better understand what somebody is truly going through.
So like leaving on or maybe bringing an inspirational note for people that are involved in, like we have a lot of probably people that are setting up companies and startups, and that would be kind of the digital health group. Any words of wisdom for the digital health entrepreneur that's starting a company or started a company recently?
Ooh, I like that question. So I would say, and I'm going to tie this back to authenticity, because I feel like it's been such a key theme that I know that's my business name too, but we have talked a lot about authenticity throughout this
It's a good
podcast.
name.
And, like, I actually can't even take credit for it. It's a good colleague, a friend of mine, Aaron. He's amazing. He came up with it. But so staying authentic to who you are, staying authentic to what you're setting out to do, and especially if you're in the digital health space, staying authentic to the patient and working authentically with patients and caregivers to drive outcomes.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
On that note, this was a really great pleasure to get to know you, Lilly. It was awesome.
Such a pleasure to get to know you too, Eugene and Jim. I know you and I know each other. I hope that we'll all get the chance to actually have a drink in person sometime. Sometime. I don't know when, but sometime.
You gotta go see the FDA in a few minutes here.
Yes, I'm off to see the FDA. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lilly.
Thank you.
Ciao.